Good morning, everybody. You're all very welcome to our Borders UR webinar on the new UK import controls from the 1st of October. I'm Kevin Honan. I'm Development and Innovation Services Director with Borders UR. Just want to go through some housekeeping matters. This presentation and webinar is being recorded and it will be distributed to all attendees after the webinar has concluded. Your camera and microphone are automatically set to the off setting. There is a Q&A function if you look down towards the bottom of your screen, and you can enter a question through there, and that will be answered at the end of our webinar today. This webinar is just the start of and part of our support to help the sector prepare for the new measures coming into place from the 1st of October. It is our intention to run further webinars over the next number of weeks and months to support the sector through these changes. There is also an online information hub available through our website, for which you see the link on the slide that's up at the moment, bim.ie/Brexit hub, where you'll find details of all the changes that are coming into place from the 1st of October. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Conor Anderson from Performance SC, who's going to lead you through the changes that are happening from the 1st of October from an expert point of view. Thank you, and I hope you find the webinar helpful.
Kevin, many thanks. Good morning, everybody. They see BIM, and I'm delighted for it to be the case. Roll me out when we've bad news to deliver. We do have bad news to deliver with regard to the operation of the rules that are changing. I have always said that Brexit is a step backwards, and I do believe it is, where we are going to make changes and they're going to be enforced on us. We didn't vote for Brexit, but Ireland is impacted more than any other country with regard to Brexit, and most people have been living and breathing it for the last 9 months to different levels. We have a huge amount of people who have never had to ship or had to use customs before, because they would be dealing with the UK market or the European market. But the one thing that's been very clear over the last 9 months is that GB is a third country. It is and does require customs documentation to be completed at a very, very high level. Now, the level of compliance that we have is very poor at the moment, and it's only going to get worse with the introduction of all of the extra SPS checks that we're going to introduce in October. Now, the consensus is that we're all going to keep going, and we're going to manage this for the 1st of October. How realistic that is, I don't really know. And there are a lot of issues with regard to border control posts, where they are being completed, where they're being made. And in fact, if you look at the HMRC website, which I was doing very late last night, they're still looking for people to submit tenders and bids for completion of or starting a border control post. So I don't want today to be death by PowerPoint. I do have a lot of slides to go through. We've a very wide audience. We've nearly 100 people on the call today. Some people will want to know very granular detail. Some people will want to know very high level. And what we've decided to do is give you all of the information, and then you can disseminate it to whatever you need to do. So we will get to a stage, we've only 45 minutes because we want to leave 15 minutes for Q&A session at the end. As Kevin mentioned, there is a chat function and a Q&A function there. If there are questions, and a lot of questions on a particular subject that I'm covering, Gavin will interrupt and say, by the way, there's 10, 12 people want to know about an RFC or something that we're discussing. So if we don't want to wait till the 45 minutes is up, please put in any questions that you have now, and we will get the moderator to look at them and understand what they're going to be. So the rules, the regulations, everything that we're talking today is going to be there to complement what we have to do with regard to completion of customs entries already. This is an extension. The burden of administration, unfortunately, is being placed on you guys, your brokers, your forwarders. So somebody's going to have to fill in this paperwork. Now, a lot of the times when I'm dealing with you guys, you're saying, I have a great broker, he's very good, he does everything for me. And while that's absolutely perfectly a good way to do it, please remember, while they're responsible for filling in the forms, you're accountable for what they say. So don't just think that because the form is being completed, that it's right and everything is hunky-dory. It may not be. I'm not saying it is, but you just need to check. Customs, if they come knocking on a door, it'll be your door. So you have already signed what's called a direct representation to Conan or Jenkinson's or whoever to allow them make declarations on your behalf, but it is on your behalf. So today, again, as I said, there's some bad news that we have to deliver, but we just want to make you aware of what's your responsibilities are. And again, as Kevin said, there will be a number of these run throughout the month of September in preparation for October. And if October is the fair till January, we will continue to do it during October and November. So one of the first things I will say to people, what should I do, is you need to register with the relevant departments, whether it be the HSE or the Department of Agriculture, Fishery and the Marines. Traces, I'm going to show you what that means and what it's going to be. And this responsible for consignment person, to register that can be an individual, it can be an agent, I'll go through it, but a lot of people have ignored that element of it. And that person also has to be registered with the relevant authorities, because they will be accountable for not only the shipment, but they need to be contacted 24 hours a day. So if it's 3 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock in the morning, which is when most of these ferries sail, and there's a problem with the paperwork, that responsible person is the person who's going to get the call. So should it be your agent? Should it be you? You need to make those decisions with regard to that individual. So the trace is NT, and NT stands for new technology. It's unfortunately not new technology. I'm going to make the assumption that everybody can read, because we have a lot of slides to go through today, but that's the sort of screenshots that you're going to be looking for. It is a multilingual, and it is going to work with regard to the SPS that we need to work on. So from a traces NT point of view, familiarize yourself with the screens. If your responsible person or your agent is going to fill in those screens, then make sure that they know how they work, make sure they know what they need to be able to in the relevant boxes. Because if there are any issues, as I said, that responsible person or your agent are going to get the phone call from the border control post or the freight agent saying, you haven't given me, or I have incomplete paperwork. So some of the things that we just need to highlight again then with regard to the food legislation, because products of animal origin, if I do use an acronym that people don't understand, please let me know in a question, but I will try and explain them when they call them out in the products of animal origin, for example. As I said, I was watching CSI Miami for 6 months before I realized COD was cause of death rather than cash on delivery. So we do use an incredible amount of acronyms. And again, we will, and it's something that we're working on, we will give you a list of all of the relevant acronyms that we use, so you can use as a reference point. All of the slides will be shared, and even the ones we don't get to go through today, I will include them as appendix slides, because I think it's very important for people to understand what they need to do at the, 45 minutes is not going to cut it. It's going to take many, many weeks. And the people who are critiquing the documents that you're filling in, as in the border control agents or the customs agents, have had weeks and months of training to do this. So us spending 45 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever it's going to be on filling in the form, it's just not going to cut it. So I would suggest that we familiarize yourself with all of the forms that we need to fill in, liaise with Borders Gawara, figure out what you need to do, and then let your people do some trial runs. There is a sandbox within Traces, so you can go in and mess around and make some declarations without submitting all of the documentation. And again, then, so figure out where your product sits. If it is going to be of animal origin and is considered high risk, then obviously there are different rules that would apply then again. But most of what we're doing here will fall under the meat, the dairy, the fish, and we're, for some reason, we're grouped in with bees and honey with regard to fish. So then you have the non-animal origin in second one there, and all of the composite products, which a big question on that is it an SPS requirement then? And that's something that can only be determined by the commodity code. So there is a list of commodity codes that will tell you whether it's a composite product and whether it's going to be an SPS requirement. Now, we have covered commodity codes previously, but I would say two of the things that you need to take away from today, other than the registering with all of the relevant authorities, is to make sure the commodity code of your product is 100% accurate. Don't ask your agent to classify your product. You should know your product. To them, it's a box or it's a carton or it's a pallet. To you, you touch it, you see it, you feel it all the time. So the classification of your product becomes absolute paramount, because that determines where it's going to be, what's going to happen with regard to any of the checks that's associated with it as well. So everything is triggered from that 8-digit code that you need for export and the 10-digit code that you need for an import. So please spend some time getting that right. If you're only dealing with one product, that's fantastic. If you're dealing with multiple products, I'm sitting in an office here, there's probably 100 different items. They all have their own individual code. Second to that would be to ensure that you can stand over the validity of the country of origin of the product, because that is going to determine the TCA agreement, this free trade agreement that we signed with the UK is determined by the origin of the product. If the product is not made in Europe or in Great Britain or the UK, it cannot avail of the benefits associated with the trade and cooperation agreement. If we bring product in from China and it's been sitting there for 2 years, and then we bring it from Great Britain into Ireland, it retains its level of origin of China, unless we have done something with it that would change what customs would call substantial transformation. So if it came in from China, they've done nothing with it, it's going to remain a Chinese origin. And likewise, if we're catching product or where we have fish coming from different origins, we need to be able to prove that as well. So it becomes very important to classify it correctly and then be able to validate and stand over the origin of the product, because then we'll be able to benefit from the trade and cooperation agreement between Europe and the United Kingdom or Great Britain. So there are 3 parts to a CHED form. And again, this might be something that is very operational for people, but unfortunately it is what it is and we have to deal with that. There is the RASFF, which is the rapid alert system for food that we need to, and then we have the different CHED forms that we're going to be looking at. The CHED P form is the one that we will be using in the majority of cases then with regard to, and then we have the live animals. Fish and fishery products then are not classed as a CHED A for live animals. Although they are live in most cases, it's not, they don't have the same level of traveling with live cattle or sheep or pigs would. So we end up in a CHED P that we would, rather than, or if we have consignments of food and feed of animal origin, then it would be a CHED D. So understanding the relevant CHED form for you and which one it is, and you can cut and paste and copy, but I would suggest that you understand what you're doing, because if you get your CHEDs wrong, everything else is going to fall apart after that. So just if you look at the end piece there, with regard to the critical points in the completion of it then as well, the transport operator and approval number, you need to have all of those beforehand then again. They'll only require certain input depending on where it's coming from, whether it be an EU requirement or for internal market. Again, we're dealing with product going into Great Britain. If we're dealing with product that can bypass and use, we now have 36 sailings a week from Ireland directly into France. They are more expensive, but they bypass all of the requirements with regard to the Great Britain and the veterinary services that they may or may not look for. The problem we have is we're coming into the potentially bad weather. And if we lose a sailing that's 26 hours transit time, we can't make that up. If I lose a Dublin Holyhead for 2.5 hours, I can make it up by the end of the day, probably. But if the sailing doesn't leave Rosslare and it doesn't arrive in Cherbourg, obviously it can't come back. So we need to make sure that we have contingency plans in place, that if I am sitting in a lovely lofty tower using the France route or directly into Holland, I need to make sure that there is bad weather and I have some live crabs or live lobster that needs to move. I have the wherewithal and the ability to be able to complete the relevant forms to get me through Great Britain, because obviously there's an awful lot more vessels. They're bigger vessels and can sail in some inclement weather as well. So we need to make sure then that while I'm thinking I might not use them, I would always say to people, prepare for the worst. And then if you get onto the French ferry, you'll have the greatest satisfaction ripping up those documents because you don't need them. But you need to be aware of what the requirements will be, because it was very apt yesterday. We had all of the storms and the storm names that are going to happen for the next 6 months or so. So just be prepared and don't think that I'll never have to use Great Britain. The biggest vessels we have are on the Holyhead, Dublin route, and then the Dover, Calais. So at some stage I might need to use them. So be prepared for that, understand what the requirements are, and then be able to submit, be able to have all of the registrations. You certainly don't want to try and register and get all of these forms when there's a truck driver sitting in Dublin Port. And in fact, he's not allowed to sit in Dublin Port. He has to get his pre-boarding notification before he arrives. And if he doesn't, then you also have problems with regard to traffic management and where is he going to sit with your live product. So just look at this. And as I said, I don't mean to be rushing or going through the individual pieces, and we'll get through it, but the slides will be yours as a reference point, and you'll be able to look at them with regard to the content that you would need. The delivery address is key because that's where the product is going to be taken for final unloading then again. The means of transport, self-explanatory. The document, whether it be an airway bill, a bill of lading, the vessel. An airway bill obviously is for an air freight shipment, a bill of lading for a sea freight shipment, and a CMR would be for a pallet shipment. If there is a seal put on it, then again, that might be put on by the department, it might be put on by you, it could be put on by some. You need to make sure that the seal is applied and it's going to be checked when it gets to the third country, and you need to put that seal number on the documentation as well. The product, country of origin, where it was produced. Now we do have issues with the likes of Carlingford Lock, which half of it is in Northern Ireland and half it's in the south. Where are they going to grow? But most people have received a license from the Crown to fish there. So that will tell you where that product origin is going to be. And there are very strict rules. Although Northern Ireland remains part of the customs union, it cannot benefit from country of origin rules and be said that it's made in Europe, because it's not. It's going to be made part. So when I do differentiate between Great Britain, which would be Scotland, England, and Wales, the United Kingdom would include Northern Ireland. So we don't have the ability to be able to put GB as a country of origin. We need to make sure then that if it is correct, and we can defend it, as I said. If we can say that it was made in Ireland, it will benefit as a European rules of origin associated with that. And then finally, where the shipping is coming from. So the shed, do I need? Which do I need? They're all of the ones. Again, you need to figure out which one I'm going to, depending on what the product. By definition, we're using the shed P because of the FIP Bordish Gawara. But if you are shipping other products, we do have clients of BIM who ship other products, whether it be fisherman's gear, whether it be nets, or whatever the case may be. Obviously, you don't need a shed form for them, but if you are consolidating a shipment or you are moving a shipment with nets and other pieces that might be required for them, you will need to make sure you get the right form and you put it in the right attachment and all of the details that are required within that then again. So what do I need to include? And again, that's just a picture of it over there to show you it. And again, if you look on the bottom in the red, on arrival consignments, we're subject to the documentation or physical check. Now, 100% check, we're going to look at then. I'm just going to go to where they will require on the 3 parts. All of your SPS shipments will be subject to 100% documentary check. That's probably a bit aspirational at this time to say they're going to do that. Identity checks will look at to see that who's it coming from, who's it going to, are the product of definition, can they understand it? And if there is a physical check, they're going to actually look into the box and try to understand. They're saying that number is going to be between 3 and 5%, but again, do they have the vets available to be able to do that? Do they have the staff available to be able to do that? But the issue that we have is that there's going to be a documentary check of 100% on all SPS shipments then again. So if you take it, for example, all of the customs entries that we're doing at the moment, they don't get a full documentary check. They probably get a post-audit check of maybe 5 or 10%. But at the moment, they're now saying there's going to be 100% check on everything that you do, which means we have to be fully compliant with all the documentation. So suck it and see, and just let's hope for the best. Just won't cut it. And particularly at the beginning, when all of the staff have been trained, the due diligence that they will be doing on your shipment, they'll be straight out of a class and they'll be looking at all of the information. And we don't have that luxury of being able to get it wrong. They do. And with the greatest respect to our customs officials, it's either right or wrong for them. You know, it's as simple as that. If you've got it wrong, they'll reject it. If you've got it right, it can carry on. And even if you get it right, you need to make sure then that a green routing doesn't mean that you have permission that's always going to be right. All that means is you have permission to proceed. Don't make the mistake of saying, well, customs gave me a green routing. No, that doesn't mean that the entry is right. It just means that you have permission to proceed. They can come back and do come back up to 3 years after the date of the shipment to ask you for proof of origin, to ask you for an original copy of the CHED form. So there are things that you need to be aware of. And when you take that deep breath and you're allowed to leave, or your truck driver is allowed to leave the compound, it doesn't mean that it's right. So doing a post-audit or looking at what's been done in your name becomes crucial. To go back to what I said at the beginning about your broker, they're really only interested in getting the shipment cleared. The level of compliance that they would use to make sure that the shipments are in and out as quickly. Think about it from their point of view. The driver sitting there is costing them a huge amount of money. So it's something that we need to look at to say, yes, I will do a check. And who is this responsible for consignment? That's what RFC stands for. Who is the person that's responsible for the consignment? Is it a person? Is it a legal entity? Can it be your agent acting on your behalf? Or if it is, they need to register with regard to the department. You have to register that role with regard to and who and what they are. So don't think of it lightly, or if you are getting somebody in your organization to do it, you need to explain to them that they may well get a phone call in the middle of the night to clarify the commodity code for the product, or the CHED form is correct, or the country of origin, wherever the shipment is going to be, that it was right or wrong. And they will. Customs are working at 3-4 o'clock in the morning, and they don't see any reason why you shouldn't be either. So if the ferries, as we know, go at strange times, but the RFC needs to also be available if there is going to be a query. And I would imagine if there's going to be a full document check right at the beginning, there will be issues right at the beginning, whether it be October or January, or whether they go and get a derogation on it. We need to be prepared for what that is. So some of the steps that the operator must take 24 hours in advance, how practical is that with the product that we're dealing with as well? And some of it, you know, when literally we're getting it in and we're coming into a port, or we're fishing right up into the last minute then. So this is what they're saying is required: a copy of the CHED form, which is the common health entry documents. The SAD, this is the customs documentation that we spoke about earlier on this year, which is relevant today. And then any of the extra pieces, the fishery products, which if we need to get the certs from the SFPA. So we would already have dealt with them, and they are getting more responsive to a lot of our queries, but they're still trying to figure out what's going to happen in October, the same way you and I are trying to do the same. So the original health certificate has to travel with the load and has to be produced at any stage if an officer or a border control post looks at that. And again, how practical is that? Where are we going to be able to do that? So we're going to be able to give them the form to be able to travel with the truck. Do I actually ever see the truck? Because I tell them to go to Carlingford Lock and pick it up and move on from there. So there's some practical logistical problems that we need to figure out. We do, and we have lobbied as much as we can with regard to practicalities of what we try to do. But again, this is a huge organization, and they're not very sensitive to some of the requirements that we would have with regard to the original documentation or the 24 hours in advance. So do speak to BIM, do speak to local people, whether it be TDs or whatever. I know there are a couple of people on this call who are very good at using as they say, all politics are local. So if you do have the opportunity, hey, this is completely impractical. There's 50 jobs on the line here because I just won't be able to manage this to the level, or the cost associated with this is going to go up exponentially. I've a 10% margin here, business here, and it's going to cost me 20% of all of my profit just to manage all of the paperwork. So they're the type of discussions that we need to have. And as I said, happy to help you with regard to the lobbying or the discussions that we need to have then again. So this is the slide that I went to earlier on, 100% check. They call it DIP, the documentary, the identity, and the physical checks. The physical checks are going to be difficult. The seal is going to be broken on it if you have already put a seal on it, and it will be resealed, and then the new information needs to be added onto the CHED form. And how is that going to happen as well? So there are a number of practical things that we just need to figure out how they're going to do it. So then again, what happened if there is a rejection? Well, the person will be contacted. The RFC will be contacted and say, hey, we have a problem with this, whether it be through your broker, whether it be through your agent, it depends what it's going to be. So if there is going to be a rejection, how do I fix it? Can I do it online? Yes, you can. That's why everything is gone online. As difficult as it is, sometimes if you do want to correct it and you're sitting at home in Killybegs, it'll be easier to do it online and fix up any of the problems that they would have. But if we're getting a documentary, 100% documentary check, believe me, there are going to be issues right at the beginning. So we need to understand. If you remember back to January, some people, we were about 60% below the expected volumes for 2-3 weeks in January, because people just said, I'm going to let this sort itself out. I don't want to be the first to get pulled up or get problems. But that's okay, but you don't have that luxury with regard to the product that you're dealing with. There might not be huge demand in October, or there may be. Some of the product is seasonal. Some of the cockles and mussels that we fish off Dundalk Way are that's part of the season. So we need to understand how they're going to be impacted by that, and whether I have the luxury of waiting and sucking and seeing, or whether they're actually going to push it out to January or March, depending on what level of derogation, if any, they get. So IPAFs, again, we need to understand what it's going to be, and it's a system that's going to replace the traces. So this is a UK-based system. You will need, depending on the Incoterms of the shipment, if you are going to be the responsible person and you are going to pay for the freight for the shipment, you may need to register with IPAFs as well as traces. Because if you are dealing with an Aldi or a Lidl or a Morrison's, they're not, nor do they want to get involved in all of the customs documentation. So if you have a lovely contract with them, you may need to register then and be able to use IPAFs or traces from our point of view. But obviously traces is a European system and IPAF is going to be a GB system. But there's some links on there if you need to understand how you register for that as well. And on there is also how to complete the CHEDs on IPAFs. So there's a link just at the bottom of this slides as to what you need to do then again. But again, it's a web-based service. It's for the completion and the issuing of the CHED forms then. So you need to make sure that you are familiar with the differences between the IPAFs and the traces. Some of the transporting fish and the transit requirements that we're going to be using, because we do use, obviously, if it's lovely if we can get directly into France or into the Netherlands, and more vessels are coming up. But as I said, they are quite expensive, and they are weather dependent. So if we are going to use, what are we going to use then as well then? So the third countries that we need to look at, the processing, there's some reference points that you can look at with regard to the traces and the publication of with regard to the importing and the export of the fishery products, specifically with the UK. You must be registered on the corporate customer system as well as the EU traces databases. And there's the link to all of those sites. The pre-notification, again, must be provided to the border control post if they ever finish them at least 24 hours prior to the physical movement. There are different requirements for different products with regard to the 24 hours over the weekend, or whether it be in a working day. And you need to understand that it's one CHED per health certificate that we're going to look for as well. So not multiple product lines. We need to understand what that's going to mean for us with regard to an example. Marks and Spencer's container coming into Ireland, they ship 3 containers a day from Coventry into Ireland and service north and south from Coventry. They have 4,500 products on each container, different, like a chicken tikka masala, pizzas, whatever the case may be. A ham and cheese pizza needs 2 veterinary certificates, one for the ham and one for the cheese. And on average, they need 1,200 vet certificates for a 40-foot container coming in here. And that's why they just said, if it needs a vet certificate, get rid of it. We're not going to service it. And that's why you'll see Denny sausages in Belfast and Marks and Spencer's, because they can't get their Cumberland sausages, or sometimes they get them and they might have 24 hours left with regard to the documentation or the best before date. So they're buying them here and getting longer time. So again, we need to understand what that means for us with regard to the health certificate and the CHED forms that we're looking at. Some of the CAT certificates that are going to be applied and the timelines that we're looking for. Again, originally we were looking for that then for January. That's old dates that we're looking for. Some of that with regard to the fishery products that we're looking for. And then to obtain the CAT certificate, I have a copy of a CAT certificate. Surely most of you guys are familiar with what they are and what they do. There would be details about the catching vessel, the amount of fish by species, the weight, the presentation and sight, such as whole or filleted, if it's a big vessel and it's filleting it out at sea. And finally, the commodity code. That's the piece that will drive everything else on it. So understanding the commodity code by different, and some products are different when they're filleted, some products have different commodity codes when they're whole. So you need to understand what they are as well. Imports will require entry via the border control post that you're looking for. As we said, some of the checks will be 100%. Goods that are in free circulation within the EU will obviously remain that way. So if I'm shipping product from here to Holland or Germany, then it's free circulation goods. But obviously we need to take into consideration the biggest market that's right on our door and what we need to do with regard to that then as well now. So they're just some of the regulations. Frequency, the physical, they're saying fish is going to be somewhere between 20 and 50%. Again, it's very aspirational. It'll end up somewhere between 3 and 5% of byproducts rather than live fish, because the SFPA or different organizations might get involved in at the beginning, but it's unlikely that they're going to be able to sustain that level for any period of time then. So this again is just a notification. I've just highlighted in yellow what I want you to focus on again, and some of the IUU pre-notification. 2 hours advance notice for ro-ro consignments if they're arriving by ferry, which is probably practical because by the time it gets on the ferry, you should know what it's going to be. This is the illegal and unregistered piece, and the SPS health certificate. The border control post will be January 2022. If they ever complete them. I think most of them are scheduled to be completed in 2023. So, but they're still standing over it. That's going to happen on the 1st of January. And we have to plan for that as an organization. You should plan for that. The issue that we have, if we keep running webinars like this and we keep telling people and then everything gets pushed out, people tend to just switch off. Even if we're only pushing it out till January, people tend to switch off and say, I'll worry about it in December. I would suggest and I would request that people remain focused on this, because it will happen at some time. The more time we have to get it right, the better. We're already behind the 8 ball with regard to organizations understanding who's going to be the responsible for the consignment, with regard to the documentation, with regard to the registration. So don't ignore the opportunity, and if they do push it out, don't suddenly go, thank God, I'm glad that's not going to happen. I'm not going to worry about that ever again. So just make sure that you do understand what it means, and when they do have the border control posts and they are going to use them, and we are ready for that. So some of the direct landings, again, this is again something that we would look at with regard to, and again, down the end, if you look at the registered vessels landing, the razors and the scallops, this is just a takeaway for you with regard to, most of you know about this already then again. So some of the documentation, some of the first to the first and the first to the first 2021 or 22, or whether it be October, as I said, it's still all up in the air, but we have to plan for October. So prior notification for fresh fish, 4 hours, 24 hours for frozen fish before it can be approved at the border control post. And then the pre-landing declaration as well as the catch certificate. And then you need to be registered also with the port state control form, which the vessel will have to fill in itself then. So again, look and understand what those requirements are and apply them to your own business, because as I said, with nearly 100 people on the call, it's difficult for me to say this is specifically what you need to do, but you should know how it's going to be relevant for you and what you do. So a lot of people have also asked with regard, I know we're dealing with primarily exports, but a lot of people buy product from Russia or from Norway and bring it in and do something with it and re-export it again. So I was asked to just put in a complete, AIS is the new import system we use. It was brought out stupidly, I believe, in November last year. It was supposed to run on its own from March of this year, but the other system is still running. The AEP system is still running with it. But just a couple of key certificates that you will need to include in box 44 of the AIS declarations, which will be the transit declaration. The numbers you will see, they're all alphanumeric codes. You don't tell customs you have a transit document. You don't tell them you have an analysis and health certificate. You tell them it by issuing a number, which is the N852 or an N820, or the CHED form is the N853. So, and the key one there again, which people are ignoring to their detriment, unfortunately, will be the certificate of origin, if it's required, which is the N865. So they're just some of the numbers that you will need. There are over 1,000 different items that can go into one box on box 44 of the customs declaration. And that's some of those forms that you can need. There's another box on the SAD form, box 37, the procedure code. There are 25 pages of guidelines on that one box on the revenue website. So again, as I said, the burden of administration is placed hugely on our shoulders, and we need to know what we're doing, because assuming it or getting somebody else to do it, the costs are getting higher. Some people are paying upwards of €100 for a customs declaration. If you're going to now ask them to fill in all of your CHED forms and all of the extra health forms, you need to understand what you're asking your agent or your broker to do and what the extra costs associated with that are going to be as well. Then. So that's something that you need to clarify now. That's just a screen grab from a copy of an AIS. The number of items, which some people make the mistake just over here on the left-hand side, the first yellow piece, that's the number of different commodity codes that you will have. If you only have one product and one commodity code, but if you have cod and herring and scallops, then you will have 3 items and you will have 3 different tariff codes. Need to make sure then the importer is going to be the registered, and they have an EORI number, which is what we spoke about at the beginning, not just a VAT number, but an EORI number, which is different. In Ireland, it's an IE. In Great Britain, it's 3 zeros before the VAT number. That means, and there is a European database available to validate either your or your client's EORI number, but you need to make sure that you have all of that detail before it leaves. Otherwise, it's too late then as well. And then just some of the other boxes always reflect the invoice currency. If we are shipping to Great Britain, in most cases, they want it to be invoiced in Great Britain, pound sterling. But if you do put in that, we don't have any control over the rate of exchange, because that's controlled by customs. So we need to make sure that we have that currency right. And if we are invoicing in GB pounds, it's reflected on the invoice. The invoice that the broker or you're using should reflect. So if we say, oh, well, I just put in the GB amount, it has to reflect what's on the invoice. So please make sure if you are issuing a GB invoice, the invoice reflects that, and it's not just a conversion rate that you're applying, because customs will want an original copy of that commercial invoice when they're doing any checks. So some of the problems that we have, and I think it's going to continue, that chaos happened in January. Chaos could potentially happen again in October. I think we're still 9 months into the Brexit, and I think we're still in the correction stage rather than in the compliance stage. We do have an awful lot of customs entries that are not checked. And so the 2 to 3 months that we spoke about doesn't really seem to be happening. So I think up to 2 years, we'll still be struggling with some elements of the compliance part of it. And as I said, chaos will ensue. What level is going to be, I really don't know. Gavin, I know, thanks, I've only a couple of minutes left, but I'm just going to get through this one slide before I open up for Q&A, because it's relevant for a lot of you guys to understand where we're going to go. There are 80,000 traders that have made customs declarations this year for the first time. They've only ever dealt with Europe before. So if I've dealt with Japan or China, then I would have an awareness what I need to do. But if I've only ever dealt with Europe, I've never had to deal with customs. So those 80,000 traders are making first-time declarations, and we're going to fall into another bucket again. We had 1.6 million customs declarations made in the whole of last year. We are estimating we're going to have 50 million declarations this year. That's an incredible jump in numbers. In January, at 60% of the expected volume, we had 2.2 million customs declarations made. That was 600,000 more than we had in the whole of last year. So have we more customs officers? No. Have we technology? Have we algorithms? Have we systems? Some of them work, some of them don't. But a key piece for you could be to understand that the increased transportation costs in some areas, whether it be China or whether it be, but across the board, it's gone up about 38%. So we need to understand, what does that mean for me? Is my business still viable? What do I need to do? Do I need to run my own trucks? Do I need to engage with different people with regard to the trucks? And because I certainly don't want my product being left on the border or on the quay and running away. So as I said, from my point of view, I will give everybody the rest of the slides. They are there, some of the targets that we're looking for. But what I would like to do, as I said, all of the slides, even the backup slides that are in there, I'll give them to everybody. But in the interest of time, I'm going to stop sharing the slides. But as I said, they all become part of it. And then I'm going to open it up from a Q&A point of view. Kevin, I'll hand it over to you now in case there's any questions or not that have come in.
There's a couple of questions there, Conor, so thanks for your presentation. I might just run through the questions. Anything that we can't answer here, we might take offline.
Absolutely, yeah, no problem.
So the first question, Conor, I own an Irish registered vessel based in Warren Point, County Down. We fish in a wild mussel fishery in shared waters. How will I be able to honestly state country of origin?
That would be an ecumenical matter. That's a doozy of a question, and it really is going to be difficult for the individual to be able to say, well, that's north, that's south. And again, the rules of origin will determine the benefits associated. It really depends on where that product is going to go to afterwards. So if it's coming in here and it's going to be fished and filleted here, then the origin. But if it's going to be sold directly to a third party based on rules of origin, then it becomes very important to be able to differentiate between one and the other. So if you could give me or give that person my contact details, I'll be able to go through what they will need to do, or if they can find out where the end product is going to go. If it's going directly into a GB or EU port, the fact that we've caught it in international waters then becomes less relevant. But if it's going directly into a GB port, it becomes more of an issue for them.
Perfect. The next question, Conor. CHEDs are a European document for importing to Europe. What have these got to do with exporting seafood to GB?
The health forms are going there, so they're looking at trying to understand that the introductions of what's happening in October with regard to the health form, they're going to complement everything that we need to do. So as well as the forms that we need to do, they're not going to come in different timelines, but they are health forms. They will form part of the documentary backup that we will require for going into Great Britain. So originally when we were bringing product in or we were going back out, GB is trying to catch up with the European Union with regard to the paperwork. They weren't ready, and now they're going to be ready. So they will form part of the backup documentation that we will need going forward.
Perfect. Next question. Do you have a simple flow chart of the process, sort of a one-pager, and can you take an example and provide time schedules for each step based on a reception date?
I do, actually. I know we did work on some infographics that we worked on before, Gavin, that we can share with people, but I do have a single slide that said 36 hours, 24 hours, 4 hours. I'm happy to add that to the presentation and give it to people, that to say 36 hours before the shipment leaves, what do I need to be doing? 24 hours before it leaves, what do I need to do? And it is in a single page, but the infographics that we worked on 2-3 months ago would also benefit that individual, Gavin.
Perfect. Is there any possibility for an exemption for small packages being sent by courier direct to the consumer in the UK? I.e., if we send a side of smoked salmon to Joe Bloggs in London with a value of €60 plus €25 shipping cost for next day delivery, do we have to go through all the paperwork, which will take hours, if not days, to process? As a private individual, the recipient will not be able to get vets to certify this documentation. I will not be registered for VAT or as an import agent.
There is an exemption for product under £135 sterling, €150, and gifts. So they would be able to benefit from that exemption. So with regard to salmon and the health forms, if they're using the integrators, as in the DHLs, they probably are because of the salmon, and they're paying all of the costs, yes, they will be able to benefit from that exemption based on the value of the shipment. If they do exceed the £135 sterling or £150, depending on the interpretation of the currency, then they will have to apply the rules. But for the moment, they will be able to get an exemption on that.
Super. Next question. I import seed. Is this something specific, or is it the same as a fish import?
Seed?
Yeah.
And is it plant seed, or is it's not seed, it's just plant seed?
There's no other information.
Yeah, so it would need a different shed form if it's plant seed, and it does also need to be covered to make sure if there's any soil, it needs to be cleansed of any soil that would be on it then again. So again, if you give that person my details, I can give them, I sort of aim today at the fishery part of it, but I do have separate slides that would cover that person with regard to the different shed forms that they would need for seed and plants. And because if there's any roots or any muck on it, then there's different rules apply on that as well. But if, again, happy to have a conversation with them with regard to seeds that they would need.
Perfect. I think that's, and the person just came back saying that's oyster seed, Conor.
Oyster seed, so they would be different. They would be, again, they will require part of it, again, depends on what weight, what level they're at then. But if they do give me the detail, oyster seeds would be covered by the shed forms that we're looking for. So it would be products of our byproducts or products of animal origin then again. So they will have to fill in the health forms on those particular. We do it with chickens and chicken eggs and things like that. So I'd imagine the same would apply for seeds. I can do a little bit of due diligence on that one, but if it's oyster seed, where does it start? When does it become an oyster? Is it 1 day? Is it 5 days? Is it after it's grown? I actually don't know the answer to that, but I'm happy to ask the relevant authorities about that.
Perfect. And would it be the same story for mussel seed?
I'd imagine so. Yeah, I'd imagine. And is that a separate question, or was it the same?
Same question.
Because if we take the mussels that we bring in from France that we put into Carlingford Lough, they come in at 5 grams, but they are mussels. They would grow there until they're 95 grams and then be shipped back. So the question is, are they French mussels or are they Irish mussels? They've grown in Irish waters, but they were French mussels to start with. But seeds would be slightly different because a mussel is a mussel, whether it's 5 grams or 95 grams, but a seed would be slightly different. But happy to check that one out.
Perfect, Conor. The next question, is there extra information required on the paperwork, i.e. invoices, CMR, etc., for goods going to the UK?
Yes, box 44 of the SAD would require all additional paperwork that would be required. We do have a sample invoice that we can share with people that they can use, which would say all of the information there's 16 minimum data points that need to go on an invoice. That's everything from country of origin, Incoterms, EOI numbers. And again, happy to include that in the deck from today. But there are, the bill of lading is a big part of it, the airway bill, the bill of lading. Any of the transit documents that would be used have to accompany and have to be mentioned in the customs declarations, yes.
Next question, we're hearing that for shellfish, the gatherer certs will pass as health certificates. Is this correct?
Again, I'd look to try and see if I could get absolute clarity on that, and I can't. The gatherer certificate, I don't think we're in a position to be able to issue vet certs for everything that we do anyway. So if there is a level of a compromise, or if there is a level and we can use the gatherer's certificate, I would suggest that would be the case, but I cannot find anywhere that says definitively that's going to be the case. But again, I think as a group, we should be lobbying to say that a CAT certificate or a gatherer certificate gives us the details that we would need, that trying to get a vet to a particular location to be able to validate something is just not practical at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And where a gatherer certificate can be issued by the responsible person, that would suffice for the health certificate. But again, if I haven't seen definitively that, but it would make sense for that to be the case. But unfortunately, common sense is not common. So I don't know whether that's going to apply.
Perfect, Conor. The next question, what will need to happen with a mixed load of gutted salmon and shellfish going to France from Ireland via the land bridge? We are a haulier. If some of the produce will need health certificates, who will be responsible for getting the health certificates? We load through the night and have been told that vets cannot be provided out of hours.
Yeah, and it depends again. So it goes back to the question that we had, who's going to be the responsible person for that? Is it going to be the agent? Is it going to be the broker? We have an awful lot of people who are pushing back and saying, I'm not going to be your responsible person, because they're not. A haulier is not technically the right person to do it. They are the face of the organization when it comes to customs, but are they paid enough to be able to do that? Are they the right people to do that? I don't think so. So the mixed load would require multiple health certificates, to use the analogy of the Marks and Spencers. So for a ham and a cheese pizza, I need 2 vet certificates. The same will apply for the gutted salmon, or the fillets of whatever is going to be, would require different declarations. So I would say that's why the responsible person needs to be contactable 24 hours a day. Is it going to be an agent, or is it going to be the company? A lot of pushback from a lot of companies on that, and the transport companies are getting stronger and stronger to be able to say, no, it's not worth it for me to be that RFC for you, because I just don't have the margins to be able to do that.
Super, Conor. Next question, will it be possible to land scallops into the UK after the 1st of October 2021?
Yes, they will need certain documentation to be able to do that. But up until now, they have had an exemption. And if the exemption still applies, maybe till January, but technically it will be, but you will need to fill in certain documentation to allow that to continue.
Perfect. The final one that's come in here at the moment.
Thank God.
It might be one that maybe we can take offline, but are the SFPA plan to roll out training on how to apply for health certs that you're aware of? It might be something that...
I looked at their website yesterday, and they do have some pieces on there with regard to the training and the requirements that you would have. It's very light, and you may need more detail associated with that, but I'd imagine the SFPA or BIM would be in a position to help people understand what training is required. I'm glad that people are asking that, because it's not going to be a simple form filling exercise, because if you do train somebody, and we've often said this to people, if I do train somebody, they might leave. If I don't train somebody, they might stay. And that's a problem that we face. So if I make somebody more valuable to another organization by training them and getting them used to all of these forms, they might leave. So, but it's not going to be a simple case. I'm 35 years plus working in customs, and I'm still learning every day. So the 80,000 companies that have never had to do any customs, like, they're all learning. Anybody that has the word customs in their CV is suddenly worth 10 grand more. So if you have customs expertise, or you say you have We had people that attended that clear customs course that suddenly went back to their boss and said, I'm now a customs expert. You're not. 45 minutes today, really all we want you to do is make you aware of all of the stuff you don't know. And that might sound strange, but that's really what we're trying to do today. If you go away and say, Jesus, I need to do something, then that's a win-win for us, because it is going to be difficult. We are going to be in a state of chaos for a couple of weeks, but we need to make sure that we're able to come out the other side by filling in the documentation in a right and useful way, either for our broker, for our trucking company, or for us if we're going to manage our own truck or our own vessel.
Perfect. There's just one more one there at the end, Conor. So for live mussels at the moment, invoice and packaging documents is what we're asked for. Should we be including the gatherer's document as well?
Yeah, certainly after October, if we get it to replace the health certificate, yes. But I would say there is a position within the SAD that you're doing at the moment to put in a gatherer's certificate in box 44. So any information you have and you have the gatherers, yes, absolutely put it in there.
Perfect. That's all the questions in the chat at the moment. If anyone has any questions after the webinar, feel free to contact BIM directly. But Conor, thanks very much for that.
No problem.
I might pass over to Kevin just to wrap things up for us.
Thanks, Gavin. Thanks, Conor. As Conor said, if we've made you aware that you need to do something, then hopefully we have achieved our objective today. We do remain available to provide further support. Please go on to bim.ie/Brexit Hub for further information. Today's deck will be circulated. We'll be hosting further webinars, and we will have further mentoring support available to provide further advice to you. We thank you very much for your time this morning, and hope you found this webinar useful. Thank you very much, and good morning.